The lead mask case comes to us from the National Archives and Records Administration in Washington, D.C., and it's a really fascinating look into one of the most devastating plagues in world history. It was 1918, and the Spanish flu was sweeping across the globe. The disease started in the spring of that year at Camp Funston, Kansas. And while it was called the Spanish flu, there is some debate as to where it actually originated. At least 50 million of those people died, including more than 675,000 Americans. In fact, the pandemic claimed more American lives than died in World War I, the Civil War and the Vietnam War combined. What we do know is how deadly it was. They were used in an effort to stop the spread of the disease. The first iteration of the mask was created by two Canadian inventors, Arthur and William Grenfell. In fact, the CDC recommends the use of N95 respirators or higher in healthcare settings when treating patients who have or are suspected of having a serious communicable disease. Their design consisted of a hood made from layers of gauze and felt with a face covering made from rubberized canvas. Instead, they were part of a cargo shipment that left New York for France in December of 1918. When they arrived at the National Archives, they had been sitting in boxes for so long that they had started to fuse together. Luckily, archivists were able to remove them safely. And a finding aid describing the entire collection can be viewed here. People who wore them were seen as being afraid to go outside. The National Archives and Records Administration has a digital collection of more than 2,600 records related to the 1918 influenza pandemic. This includes everything from posters to photographs to personal letters and medical manuals. There's even a recording of a radio program from the 1930s discussing the flu pandemic, which was found in the archives of the National Audio-Visual Conservation Center. You can also follow us on social media to get updates and behind-the-scenes information. Volunteers are essential to our museum, and we couldn't do what we do without their help. If you're interested in becoming a volunteer, please visit our website for more information. After all, the thought process was that if you were sick, you wore the mask to keep others safe. But if you weren't sick and you were wearing a mask, it meant you were scared. Why do you think the use of these masks declined so rapidly? Let me know in the comments. All of these materials have been preserved for future generations to learn from. Your support helps us preserve fragile and deteriorating photographs like these. You can donate securely through our website. Just click the donate button at the top of the page. We also use your donations to digitize items like this lead mask. Then we upload the images to our website, making them available for everyone to enjoy. And by February of 1919, people were starting to tire of wearing masks. Newspapers reported on the growing resistance to mask mandates. And in Chicago, people took to the streets to protest them. Many businesses even began to advertise their products as mask-free zones. By March, the paper said, the mask idea has gone to the dogs. And by April, mask orders were lifted in many parts of the country. This shipment contained over 3,500 of the boa green masks, along with thousands of pairs of goggles and rubber gloves. None of the items were ever delivered to France and instead were shipped back to New York in January of 1919. Upon inspection, it was decided that the cargo should be burned. An Ohio newspaper reported that it was likely done so due to damage sustained during shipping. But others speculate that the shipment was destroyed because of the changing public perception of the masks. The face covering was pulled tight to the neck with strings. A second version of the mask was then developed by the U.S. Army Medical Corps and consisted of layers of gauze sandwiched between two layers of rubberized fabric. This version was easier to put on and take off and allowed for people to breathe more easily. These masks were then modified again so they could be reused. They became what's known as the boa green mask, consisting of a rubber face piece with a canister attached to it by a tube. The face piece sealed to the wearer's face with a tight-fitting elastic band. Then the canister could be removed and replaced as needed. Before the Spanish flu, the general consensus was that diseases were spread through something called bad air, which included everything from cholera to tuberculosis to yellow fever. By the time of the Spanish flu, researchers knew that the disease was spread through the air, but they didn't know exactly how far those disease-ridden droplets could travel, or how long they could remain suspended in the air. What they did know was that the droplets came from people with the disease, and that wearing some sort of mask might help prevent their spread. But it was until the late 19th century that researchers started to understand that many of these diseases were caused by microorganisms that could survive on surfaces and be transmitted through the air by tiny droplets released when someone coughs or sneezes. This discovery led to the creation of things like the germ theory and eventually antibiotics. It spread quickly among soldiers and then spread even faster when those infected were sent out to fight in the trenches of World War I. By July, the disease had made its way around the world, and by October, it would claim its first victim in Washington, D.C. By this point, not much was known about the virus, but researchers believe it was an H1N1 strain. In total, the Spanish flu pandemic infected about 500 million people, or about a third of the global population. In D.C., more than 8,000 people would be infected and more than 700 would die, which is why these lead masks exist. While the masks may seem primitive by today's standards, they were cutting edge at the time. But it was still early in the 20th century, and understanding how airborne diseases spread was still developing. So various health organizations got to work creating devices that could filter out the bad air and prevent people from getting sick. While these masks are no longer used today, similar technology is still used in modern N95 respirators. But what about these lead masks? Well, they were never actually used in the US. You see, while the masks were considered state-of-the-art at the time, they also represented fear. These lead masks sat in storage in Washington, D.C., for nearly 100 years before they were donated to the National Archives and Records Administration. These masks are just one small piece of a much larger story. Some of these materials have been digitized and can be viewed on the National Archives website. Others will be available soon. Because of the efforts of archivists and the donations of caring citizens like yourselves. And speaking of caring citizens, we'd like to thank our supporters for their donation. If you'd like to help us preserve more artifacts like this, please consider making a donation. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you can be notified every time we upload a new video. Before you go, I'd like to give a special thanks to our volunteers who helped us research and write this script. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.